Hi everybody, Dr. Taylor Burkhardt here to talk about tonight's Met stream, Idomeneo by Mozart. So this is considered Mozart's first mature work, and it premiered in 1781 when he was 25 years old. It's fine, we all did great things like that by the time we were 25, right? Anyway, this is considered an opera seria. There are two really good examples of this in Mozart's works, and the other is La Clemenza di Tito, which he wrote much later actually. So this opera differs from ones like Marriage of Figaro and Don Giovanni in terms of form and just the structure of the overall opera. So for example, this opera, like all opera seria, is built mostly around recitative and arias, as opposed to if you think of all of the very famous ensemble numbers in Marriage of Figaro, right? So that's the big difference structurally. So there are a few innovations that Mozart did to opera seria though. So if you think, so this is a Baroque tradition. Handel wrote mostly opera seria, for example, and there is this secco recitative where the harpsichordist, rolls a chord and the singer goes da 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 da, right? And they're usually talking to another character. That's what moves the plot along. And then they have these big da capo arias where the opera singer just stations themselves and sings about their feelings on stage. That was the format. They had the da capo refers to they sang an A section where they had one feeling, then they have another section where they have a slightly different feeling, and then they da capo they go back to the head, the A section, where they sing that first feeling that they had again, but maybe with some more ornamentation. Ooh. So thinking, for example, about like Giulio Cesare by Handel, Cleopatra has untold number of arias, right? And the whole thing is really based around these arias with a couple duets thrown in here and there. And Idomeneo is also mostly arias. We have a few ensembles. Mozart stretches it a little bit, he has a quartet, he has a trio, a couple duets, and he also includes the chorus as a really prominent figure. They're kind of their own character in this opera. So the subject of Idomeneo is a serious, like opera seria, serious opera. It is based on Greek mythology. So we have Idomeneo, the king of Crete, and he has been in this terrible storm at sea where everyone's dying around him. He calls out to the god Neptune for help and says, "Neptune, if you save me, I will sacrifice the first being that I see on the shore." Well, of course, he arrives safely, but the first being he sees on the shore is his son, Idamante, the prince. And most of the opera he's avoiding telling Idamante, so he acts really weird toward Idamante. And so I'm gonna start out with his aria. This is kind of an beginning middle. This is toward the middle of the opera. And so there's something else Mozart did. So whenever you get really, really worked up in a recitative in the Baroque opera seria, the composer can choose to use something called accompagnato, accompanied recitative, where the orchestra comes in. Instead of just a harpsichordist and a cellist, maybe you get the entire freaking orchestra. And what it does is it really heightens the drama and the emotions, which makes sense because Mozart is well known for innovating more psychological drama in opera, really delving in to that character's emotions in a more concrete way than we've seen in the past. So Idomeneo has a long accompanied recitative before his aria where he contemplates a lot of things and has a lot of feelings about those things, and it finally just explodes in what I think is kind of a great twist on the classic Baroque rage aria, if you're familiar with that genre. And we get, just like a Baroque aria, we have a long introduction, and then it introduces the melody that Idomeneo will sing. Idomeneo sings the melody. The difference is that instead of a plain da capo aria, we have something that's more akin to the 5-part rondo, which is a little bit sexier for this time period. It's more in vogue than the old da capo arias. So He sings the first section, and then he has 3 different things in the middle before we return to that original melody. So, without further ado, here's some Flor del Mar. Quite a lung capacity to sing Idomeneo. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so you maybe figured out from my beautiful singing, Idomeneo is kind of a heroic tenor role. A lot of the times, the tenor that sings Idomeneo, you know, they could also sing maybe Tamino, but you probably wouldn't catch him singing Ferrando anytime. So it's this heavier tenor role, and so we've learned Idomeneo is kind of the conflicted central figure to all of this. Let's go to Idamante's first aria. So Prince Idamante is the hero of the story, and fittingly, he is played by a castrato. Today, we have a mezzo sing it in pants roll. But if you don't know what castrato is, so this was the most celebrated type of voice in Mozart's time. They always sang the heroic roles. And so the way you get a castrato is you have a boy soprano, and you decide maybe you want to keep him as a soprano, so they castrated them, and then they had this lovely adult male soprano voice. They were celebrities, though, of their time. They were the opera stars. They did sing all of these romantic, heroic roles. And today we have mezzos sing them in pants roles, occasionally countertenor. But usually for a role like this, it sits a little too high for a countertenor. So it's kind of a high mezzo role, actually. So Idamante, this aria that I'm choosing to do a bit from actually reminds me a lot of Zesto's aria in Clemenza da Tito. And so this is something that I love about Mozart's heroes, is that they have this strong heroic arias, but they also have a little soft side, right? So they are not afraid to be a little bit vulnerable. And here he's singing to the Princess Ilia, who is the Trojan princess. She's kind of a prisoner of war. If you know anything about the Trojan Wars in Greek mythology, she is the Trojan princess. So Idamante has fallen in love with her, though, and he is singing a little bit about his feelings in this first slow introduction, which this is reminding me of Zesto. Zesto also has a slow introduction where he sings about his feelings to Vitellia. And then we have an allegro section. So let me start out by playing this first adagio maestoso. Then we have the heroic section. And he goes on and sings this long heroic aria. There something interesting about the allegro section of this, the fast section, is that Mozart innovates, as he's wont to do, and uses these short larghetto sections, so a little bit slower sections, where you get to see that little bit of vulnerability again. So I'm going to show you an example of one of those, where he's alternating. So we have Di Calabarmeno e non chiedo altra mercé. And he goes back into the faster part, but he continues to do this throughout the allegro. Actually, there's these parts where you get to see just that little bit of vulnerability and tenderness, and it's really nice. And again, it's showing just a little bit more about this character's psyche than you maybe would have gotten from some of Mozart's predecessors. So the next aria I'm going to go to is one of Ilia's. She has 3 main arias in this. This is actually my favorite, so that's why I'm doing it. It is Zeffiretti Lusinghieri, and she's by herself at this point, and she's realized, so her deal, she is the prisoner of war Trojan princess. Obviously Idomeneo been really nice to her since he's fallen in love with her, and at this point she's gotten over her conflict a little bit of how the people of Crete killed her father, and she's just fully, being in love at this point with Idomeneo, Prince Idomeneo. So she gets, her music is really just completely, it's graceful, it's beautiful, she has long lines, and it's always got this sense of tenderness to it, even in her first aria, I think, to an extent, which is a little bit more tormented. So I'm going to play just a little bit of this for you. Again, just like in Idomeneo's aria, we get her melody in the orchestral introduction before she actually sings it. I'm just going to play hers because I do not sound good singing it. It sounds very graceful. She has these moving notes. It's very beautiful, and she's just kind of daydreaming here. She has the beautiful middle section. She has to have lungs of steel, though. These notes are, she's just holding high up sharp for eons, decades, and so it's always very impressive to hear. The interesting thing that Mozart does with this aria, because he can't just leave an aria, as in its standard old form, he does something that you actually see a lot of in Don Giovanni, where instead of, he sort of starts to let the aria close, but instead of really letting it close, he goes straight into an accompanied recitative. So here we think we're going to go. right? Because something's changed. She sees Idomate at this point. She's like, oh, I've been daydreaming about this guy, and now he's here all of a sudden. What am I going to do? But instead of letting her aria end and have this, he innovates the form a little bit and makes it so it flows more seamlessly. Mozart. The last character I want to talk about is Electra. So if you're familiar with Greek mythology, this is the exact same Electra. Or if you're familiar with Strauss's Electra, much later, this is that same Electra. She is on the Isle of Crete after everything has happened with her family, and she's actually also in love with Idomate, and she's insanely jealous of all the attention Ilia's been given. And she has a few really great rage arias in here. You need an incredible soprano to sing Electra. So I'm going to give you a little bit of her rage aria. Again, I keep using that term. It's such a Baroque thing. And she has a long introduction. Hers does less about setting up her melody as much as it sets up her mood. So. So it just continually moves through like that the entire time. She doesn't let up for a second. Her last aria is also incredible, but what I'm going to go to is actually her middle aria. This is always, I mean, it's poor Electra. She has gone through a lot too, but she has this really interesting aria where you hear her trying to sound like Ilia, right? We've heard Ilia's Zeffirati lusinghieri. Electra's usually very angry, but here is her impression of Ilia. She's trying to win Idomate over a different way now. This is Electra, not Ilia. So you just hear da, right? All of these very graceful, Ilia-like things. The tricky thing is that Electra is usually sung by a fuller-bodied soprano, and it's so hard for them, I think, sometimes to go from these very fast-moving rage arias to these long lines. That's why I say Electra has to be just an incredible soprano, because she has to be able to do both. So, with that in mind, with all of these ideas for opera seria and Mozart changing them, I just can't recommend enough just thinking in terms of what he's changing, what he's revolutionizing, and seeing how he's kind of sticking to these old forms, but changing them in his own way to suit the drama and really heighten the psychological analysis of each character. So I hope that tonight you enjoy some Idomeneo.